Welcome, Vic. How you doing?
Yeah, very well. You?
Yes. Very well, thank you. Okay, well, let's kick off. So, first of all, just a very warm welcome to the new members of the committee, John and also Councillor Drake and Councillor Timmins. Really looking forward to your contributions. Whether I try and run this is to be very participative. So there's a lot of work goes into the preparation of documents. John, thank you already for the due diligence you've been putting into some of the notes. Do appreciate that. Thank you. We'll make sure that everyone has a chance to have their voice heard. Comments, feedback, suggestions will be directly invited and expected. So that can continue. So let's kick off. So do we have any apologies for this evening, please?
Yes, Chair. We've got Councillor Cvetkovic has given his apologies.
Okay, and we'll see Councillor Ray is able to join us as well. Okay, next item. So, are there any councillors who would like to make any declarations of pecuniary interest or personal interest before we commence?
No.
I'd like to go. Thank you. Very good. Okay, next item is the chair's reports. I don't have a chair's report. Any urgent items we need to go? Thank you. Have we received any public questions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, next item is to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which you can find on pages 1 onwards. These are meetings the 5th of March. A few moments to check those.
Already done.
Are you?
Said I read it at home,
Okay.
so I'm good.
Any comments or questions from the members? Okay, all those in favour of accepting the minutes from the 5th of March, please raise your hands. Thank you very much.
What's it? Initial.
To the 11th.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is the officers' report. So, if you would mind starting with 5.1, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, the first item tonight is the forward plan and resolution tracker. All the items on the resolution tracker from our last meeting have been marked as complete. Looking ahead, the main item at our next meeting in September will be when we kick off the budget setting process for the next financial year. The committee may also wish to note that if approved here, the agenda items relating to the year-end accounts will be presented at council later on this month, on the 23rd of June. Okay, let's take any questions.
Sorry, it's historic because I might ask a number of questions while I catch up. Obviously, the accounts risk committee is no longer, and therefore, presumably, what was covered by the accounts risk committee is now going to be covered by this committee. Is that true?
Yes. So there's some items are going to be covered by this committee. Other items can be covered in other ways through just general communication. So, for example, what the intention is, the transparency report that we used to look at for items over £500, that will be available on the website and communicated via the information bulletin. So we've got everything covered that we need to from the council risk.
One I was particularly interested in is outstanding income. How is that being reviewed?
I'll add that to the forward plan.
Thank you.
It's on here. It's on
here.
Oh,
sorry, it is that. It's on top of the page. I've missed it. I apologise. Yes, excellent. Good. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on those two items? One item I didn't see here was, and maybe this takes place on another committee, and I do apologise, was the code of conduct for councillors. Is that on the pattern to review?
I think it certainly can be reviewed. I think it was.
We've reviewed that before.
We've
definitely done it in the last 2 years.
Yeah, we did it. It was a couple of years ago. I think when everyone started. I'm not sure if it was done. I think it was done at council. I think rather than here.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, so code of conduct generally is a council matter. So if there was a review of it, it would come through the council plan.
Okay, understood. Very good. Okay, so if there's no further questions, members will be able to vote in favour of noting both the forward plan and the resolution tracker, please. Okay, thank you very much. Daniel, it's just the next item regarding terms of reference for this committee, please.
Thank you, Chair. So regularly reviewing the committee's terms of reference is important to ensure its purpose, responsibilities remained aligned with the council's current objectives as well as relevant policy or regulatory changes. It supports good governance by giving councillors the opportunity to review and ensure there is a collective agreement. With this in mind, some minor changes have been made to the terms of reference as outlined in section 3.4 of the report, which is on page 12. This is also your opportunity to officially appoint the deputy chair of this committee. Have to take any questions.
What do you have in mind as a strategic partnership?
With the
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. The strategic partnership stuff are our very high level partners across the town that we work with, and without working in partnership with them, we wouldn't be able to deliver our key functions. So two really good examples would be the police. We do an awful lot around the work with the police, and another would be the Hartland Trust, who across all of our, or a lot of our business plan priorities, we're working in partnership with them on. Other ones would obviously include the county council and the district council. So those are those partnerships that are really intrinsic to us delivering our work, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Insurance. I see it here in the term of reference. I haven't seen any other reference to it in the accounts, either breakdowns of what is provided in terms of insurance and any claims or payouts on insurance.
So that's not, in the past, there hasn't been a detailed report on insurance. It's just been covered off by through the budget monitoring as we go through the year. So I'm going through the renewal process at the minute with our insurers. So our year for insurance runs from 1st of July. So as soon as all, if it's of interest, as soon as all of the premiums are sort of passed on to me from our insurance broker, I can add them to the budget monitoring report.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate moment to mention it, but we've had two cancelled events: the Christmas fair and the more recent carnival. I'd be interested to know what happens with that in terms of insurance. Are the events insured? Do we self-insure?
So our public liability, if you like, is insured, but any sort of cover due to adverse weather, the premiums have been so high.
Yeah,
it doesn't provide value for money.
Yeah,
to
get
insurance. Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
So in other words, our insurance does not cover lost revenue for the council from cancelled events.
No.
Just to add to that, Chair, so in particular with insurance policies that relate to adverse weather, it's also difficult to get insured in the first place.
Thanks for God.
So, yeah, so exactly, yeah. So events is quite a tricky one, really.
Yeah.
Of course, at the point in which taking the decision on to cancel, the insurance element actually doesn't come into it either.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a tricky one. Insurance. There are some losses. A number of, say, contractors or performers, we have to pay the full amount. Others we're able to negotiate for discounts, or in the case of Carnival, which is been rearranged. We've got a new date for that. We're able to transfer some bookings to another date. So there is a financial loss associated with those decisions, which is always secondary actually in the decision making. They're always health and safety related. And Chair, also just to partly answer the question about insurance matters. So as Dan sets out, the insurance premium and the financial elements of insurance will come through the budget setting. But where there are insurance issues or claims, once they get to a certain stage at which councillors or committees should be aware of them, they would come through a committee, and they would come through this committee ordinarily in the first instance. On occasions they may go straight to council. But we have very few of those that reach the stage of well, we have very few generally, where it gets to the point of a claim being closed, they would kind of come through committee or council for information.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
From the point of interest, when an event is cancelled, we just normally lost the commercial income. Do we have to compensate the individual merchants?
No.
We just refund the deposit of things. We just don't get anything.
Yeah, so we won't receive the income, and as the town clerk said, there'll be the expenditure that's already been outlaid where we might have had to pay a deposit that we won't necessarily get back. But then it depends how each supplier we've got a good relationship with, so we'll try and negotiate the best deal that we can.
And Chair, again, just if I can, just to add to that, there's a large element of goodwill that we apply. So if you imagine traders in particular, a lot of traders are producing things for the event. So quite often we will either refund pitch booking, or we will carry that over to a future event, because we do recognise the implications of taking those decisions. And that's always a tricky part of the timing of the decision. So when we look at farmers market cancellations, because of high winds, generally because of the stalls, we try to take them as early in the week as possible, because we recognise that a lot of produce is being made for the farmers market. So we try to take them early on in the week. Large scale events are slightly different. We try to leave it as reasonably late as possible, depending on the event and the circumstances of the forecast.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions myself. I mean, presumably there's a parallel review to the terms of reference for the Community Services Committee as well. Okay, very good. And just to check, I didn't see legal items on there, but any legal matters go to the full council. Is that correct?
Yeah, generally, Chair. Yeah, unless they're very specific to a committee's piece of work, it might come through committee in the first instance. But large scale legal matters would either go to council directly, or a kind of a dedicated group if set up.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, if there's no further comments or questions on this matter, I'll just ask the members here just to note to review these. I know we've got one more thing to do. We need to agree a deputy chair. Do we have any volunteers to be deputy chair for the committee?
No.
Would you like to volunteer? Self-nominate?
Yeah. It will be great.
Yeah.
Okay, so all those in favour of noting the terms of reference, please raise your hand. And secondly, all those in favour of Councillor Tong as deputy chair for the committee, please raise your hand. Very good, thank you very much. Next item is the provisional outturn. So if you could just lead us through with the next section, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the provisional outturn for last financial year. If I can draw your attention to the table on page 17, it summarises the year-end variances. The total variance was 685,000, of which 444,000 relates to capital projects and projects funded from earmarked reserves. These variances are due to the timing of expenditure rather than actual savings. So the remaining 240,000 is primarily due to factors we've discussed at previous meetings, including interest on investments, employee savings, and higher commercial income. This full amount has been allocated to specific earmarked reserves, which are detailed later on in the agenda on the next item, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, please. Councillor Drake.
Firstly, just on the table, you referred to, the Christmas Carnival cancelled to adverse weather appears to have resulted in us gaining £10,000. Is that because it's something we therefore didn't spend? Right, okay. I just need to make sure your convention is reversed where I normally see it in commercial. It's always confused me as that. There were a number of questions which I posed to the finance officer, which I copied you in on, partly to bring myself up to speed, but one or two very specific questions. They could be raised under either this item or the next item, so I'll raise them here, if that's all right. There were 3 items where I asked for explanations of variances, which I think you've forgotten to give me an answer to. Because I asked you why the neighbourhood green spaces changed from 58,000 to 17,000, Hartman and Common cost from 40,000 to a 7,000 profit. The farmers market from a 12,000 profit to a 4,000 loss, which is the one that really puzzled me. And you've simply, I think you've forgotten, I think you've headed it up and then you've forgotten to give me an answer. We've all done it, Dan. So would you mind therefore just give me an answer to those three questions?
In my defence, I think it's my presentation skills rather than the explanation. I'm hoping so. What that relates to is in the previous financial year where we had the grounds maintenance contract.
Right.
All of those costs were allocated to the farmers market, the neighbourhood green spaces. So those costs have been removed from those areas in 2024-25, and that's meant that's part of the increase to employees. So it's purely the way it's presented in the accounts. So with rather than allocating the employee costs out on a whichever sort of apportionment basis the previous contract was done, that's the reason for the change, just purely coding.
Chair, can I just add to that? So that explanation there relates to all four of those.
I've got what you just said, yes, because I also asked about why the employee costs have gone up 10% when your employees had remained level according to your own accounts, which is fascinating, really. But okay, I'll accept that. But so the farmers market now shows us a loss. They've allocated it. What does that mean?
So I think with the farmers market, the thing that we've often spoken about is the weighing up the commercial aspect of it versus the community aspect of it. So the farmers market, I think it's £37 for a stall. So it could be something that we looked at to increase that to try and bring the costs in line. But it's not something that we've looked at in the past because we want to make it a very vibrant market and encourage people to come with a lot of diverse things. So
I think I'd agree with those sentiments. It just looks very odd when we run an event at what appears to be a loss. As long as the council understands that, I understand the argument that we may well be providing a facility which has wider benefits than financial benefits. I can grasp that. It was just something that caught my eye as to why something that was making a profit previously has suddenly made a loss. Okay. Some of my other questions you gave me answers to. I asked about the impact of the ground maintenance contract, and I think you're saying we'll get a review of that at a later date, how it's working against what we forecast as being I haven't seen a report in previous CPFs about when we've changed the ground maintenance contract, whether it's kept in line with the original projections on which the council decided to change the ground maintenance contract.
There's not been an official report. Obviously, We've been keeping an eye on things as officers. It's something that on the positives of bringing it in-house have been brilliant. With the flexibility that we've got with having them as internal staff, and from the financial side, the big expenditure of the machinery that's been purchased has been within budget, and we've got the reserve in place to top that up, so we've got enough in time to.
I fully supported this bringing in-house, and I see no reason why it hasn't been a good idea, particularly with the likely devolution that would come. It's an even better idea now than it was at the time. It was just that I think if we're looking at the budget, next year's budget later in the year, it would be interesting to know whether it is in line or not when considering that budget. I wouldn't like a variance arising because of that. And the same argument as well to the commercial income on the AGP. It's the reverse way round, but again, are we getting the commercial income that we expected from the AGP? Because that's a major source of additional income to the council. Again, it was a fabulous idea, fully supported it at the time, still think it's a fabulous idea, but it just need to know what the impact of the net, particularly as we head towards devolution. my rather cheeky question on car parking, I'll leave for a later day. Interest income, I was a bit puzzled on your table on page 20. Right? No, nothing changed. There was something else. No, that's right. On page 20 was all right because it showed the interest income on there. I went back to the budget for 25-26 that was presented to this committee in January. And I couldn't find a line as to where the interest was in that budget. It's obviously there somewhere because the bottom line ties up, but I couldn't see which caption heading it was under.
Yeah, well, Dan is just going through that, just to pick up on the grants maintenance town ranger service. So whilst there hasn't been reports through this committee, there's been regular updates through council and
All right.
business plan update.
Maybe it's I've looked in the wrong place.
Yeah,
There's so many papers.
So I can dig out some links to our business plan, you know, our colour coded update, because we've referred to it a number of times.
I would appreciate that, but just so I understand what's happening in the grounds maintenance country, just so I understand really. Oh, that's it there, is it? It's under corporate management, right, okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that interest was spelled corporate management, so my apologies for that. Okay, right, that was because as you know, I'm fascinated by the interest because when the rates go up,
Yep.
We've got extra money to spend. But if rates come down, it's difficult to cut what you've committed to in the revenue that you're funding. But that seems to have been managed, you know, as far as I can see. I won't bore the committee any further with any further detail. Thank you very much indeed for your time helping me get back to understanding. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. Is there anything you'd like further just to explain to the committee?
No.
I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
The capital projects, do we have a breakdown of what they are?
So later on in the agenda, place to look. So if you look on page 28, in the amounts used column, so you've got things like the storage facility, the electrical supply in Northampton Park.
Okay, that's sums of actually used. The total that corresponds to the 789,000.
Okay. I thought it was 7,000. It is 7,000. Yeah, it's 520. Right.
So yeah, the corresponding to the adjusted budget of 789,000. They're the amounts used.
So the adjusted budget of 789, that's what was released for the different projects, but 441 is what was spent.
Right. Okay.
The amount used is 353,000.
Oh, apologies. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, this is what's been. Yes, what's been spent.
Capital reserve only.
Sorry, just got one other question as well, just for my education. I see in the original budget, there's no sums in for the reserves. Is there a reason for that?
So it's just as things are released, they're shown. So the original budget excludes any reserves, and then as we go through in the monitoring, it's shown in there. So the original budget, we don't show any of the reserves that have been released, just in case things change.
Right.
So the original budget excludes all of the reserves.
Yeah.
But then as we go through the year, they're released. So the first set of monitoring papers you'll receive at the September meeting, everything that's been released to date will be shown in the revised budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, just add a bit of context to that because local government finance and accounting is bizarre.
Yeah,
I've been involved for 20 odd years and it's still bizarre. When we talk about release, that's kind of an accounting term where we're releasing out of one of our reserve pots to help offset the general budget, if you like.
yeah,
So released is different to authorised or approved. So released is just an accounting term, which is why we get this kind of bizarre scenario where we have this huge year-end kind of what looks like a surplus.
Yeah, that was my first thought. It looked
Yeah.
like a big service. doesn't it?
So what it looks, what it often looks like is that we've agreed to do something, we haven't done it, which is often not the case. Normally not the case. It's more of an accounting thing. When it gets released out of that pot to help the general budget, we're often quite due diligent in that we release the full amount up front, even though not necessarily it will get delivered within that year. So it's a bizarre local government accounting thing, but released means taking it out of one pot so that it can be used against the general budget.
okay, thank you.
Any further questions on the outturn? There's the council minutes page. So, right, so this is just for us. Lucas, ask us to note the outturn.
And then,
Oh, right. Okay, the accounts is a separate item. Okay. So all of those in favor able to note the reports? Raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next item on page 21. This is our year-end account for 24.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this item is the statement of accounts for last financial year. It's a formal summary of how the council has managed its finances between 1st of April and 31st of March, and it's something we're required to produce each year. For a town council like ours, the accounts include things like the income and expenditure, the value of our assets, and the balances that we're carrying forward. The purpose of bringing this to the committee is to ensure transparency, demonstrate sound financial management, and give councillors the opportunity to ask questions or raise any concerns before the accounts are formally approved by council. There are a couple of points I'd like to highlight. First, the significant reduction in cash at the bank from 626,000 to 174, which is on the balance sheet on page 36. This is primarily due to the timing of capital project payments and the reallocation of funds into short-term investments to optimise interest returns. And secondly, regarding the council's reserve position, as at the 31st of March, the council's total reserves stand at 2.3 million, which is a net decrease of 222,000 compared to the previous year total of 2.5 million. This is mainly due to planned drawdowns from the capital receipts reserve, which decreased by 353,000 in line with our strategic investment in infrastructure in community projects. On the other hand, the earmark reserves increased by 131,000, reflecting the council's proactive approach to setting aside funds for future priorities and deferred projects. The general reserve remained the same at 597,000, providing a healthy buffer equivalent to over 4 months of our net revenue expenditure for 2025-26, which is in line with our reserve policy. Overall, the council continues to demonstrate prudent financial management, balancing investment and community priorities with the need to maintain sustainable reserves. Our reserve strategy remains aligned with the 10-year asset replacement plan and the council's medium-term financial strategy, ensuring we're well positioned to meet both the current and future obligations of the council. Sorry, that's a lot of numbers. I'll stop talking. Got any questions?
Questions for the members, please. Councillor Drake.
Sorry. Firstly, I think I pointed out to it on page 32, the wrong deputy town mayor.
That'll be corrected for those when it goes to council. Thank you for pointing that out.
Actually, I don't know. It's Washington. Secondly, that comment. You obviously mentioned capital replacement in the plan, ensuring you have enough replacement for that. I know that the replacement plan came, I think it was at the last meeting or the meeting before that. I was delighted to see you were continuing with that because, as you know, I was the man beating the drum for that. My only question on that, there's quite a lot of gaps shown at the bottom. Is there a plan for covering those gaps?
So it's
Or are
something,
you just assuming that, like Mr. McCorb or something will turn up?
I think what the strategy that we've applied is to try and cover all of the known expenditure we've got in that asset replacement plan over the next 3 years.
Right.
So anything beyond that, it's certainly something that we can debate when the budget papers come in September, whether we need to start setting a budget up to close that gap for future years. So change what you do.
Chair, just to add to that, the reason why we look at a 3-year horizon on this is that covers the remaining 2 years of the existing business plan period, plus 1 year to give us a buffer post any next sort of elections.
Okay.
We don't want to be kind of caught out in new business plans. I think the other thing to say on that is actually we're probably fairly unique in having that longer horizon of the 10-year period. And so it's one thing knowing that we've got some other things coming down the line. It's very rare to fully fund all of that up front at this point in time. So that's the plan of the 3-year horizon.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I just wanted to understand where you've taken it because we'd only just introduced it when I left the council. Just see where you've taken it in the last couple of years. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the members?
Oh, sorry, I did have one. On page 43, under the reserves, the two big numbers that jump out, storage facilities and the new art house. What are those reserve numbers derived from? Or what are they for?
So the storage facility has been purchased already, so
Yeah.
that's just the other side of the football club. So we use that for storing equipment and
Yeah.
all our machinery. Now that that all came about as part of the grounds maintenance contract being brought in-house.
Right.
And the site was purchased from St Albans District Council, so that's already happened. With the pavilion,
Yeah.
that work's ongoing at the minute. That 400,000 was an indicative figure. As things progress, that figure is likely to change, but there's likely to be a report on that in at council at the end of the month.
Right. Okay.
It is expected to be lower or higher than that 400,000.
I think so much has changed.
So you don't have ballpark feeling.
So Chair, it's a complete review of the project and the viability of it. I wouldn't be able to give you figures now, but it's the direction of the project as opposed to the cost of what we've already agreed.
I think you're looking at external funding as well, aren't you?
External funding was an element of it, yeah, and so there's question marks around the viability of the external funding, the costs of what we've got planning permission for, and there's a new vision, should we say, that meets that aims to meet the requirements of the business plan, but does it in a way that's viable. So that comes to council at the end of this month.
Okay, look forward to that.
What is the budget for the pavilion out of interest?
So, Chair, the project budget originally was £750,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the town council has 500 grand allocated. So the 400 plus a further 100,000 in here for demolition to existing pavilions.
Yeah.
And the plan was always to secure an additional £250,000 from the Football Foundation.
Yeah.
Or 249,999 because it's just below their authorisation level. However, there's question marks about that funding. But just to fill some of the gaps, we actually went out to tender for the build, and what we got back, committee would have heard this before on council, is far exceeding what the project budget was.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why we paused, just to check that it is still viable. Because the last thing we tend to do is just to crack on regardless. So there's been a bit of work around that. That's coming back to council with the proposed way forward
Thank you.
for council to decide.
Any more questions or comments on the accounts? Okay, right, so we've asked to note the reports and recommend to forward the report to council, including the level of reserve and release of reserves in section 5 on the statement accounts. So all those in favour of those actions, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Right, move on to the internal audit report, please.
Chair. So I'm really pleased to say we've received substantial assurance from our internal auditors with no recommendations, which you can see in section 1.5 of their report on page 51 of the pack. This should hopefully give council a reassurance that the numbers quoted in the previous two reports are correct, as no recommendations have been made following the audit. Happy to take any questions.
Well done.
Feels good.
It's a rare thing that I've been through a few of these in different lifetime, and you always come up with a few yellows and ambers. Any questions for Daniel on the audit report, please? All of those in favour of noting the report? Thank you. Right, the next item is review of standing orders and financial regulations. So Daniel, would you like to introduce both items, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is our annual review of the financial regulations and standard orders. The key updates to the financial regulations are highlighted on page 59 of your pack. These changes are intended to better align the regulations with our current spending levels and the new staffing structure. There are a few minor amendments to the standing orders which are made to correct references in between paragraphs. So, but nothing major to report on, but happy to take any questions.
Go one by one. So just comments on the financial regulations first, please. Councillor Drake.
I just have one point actually. I mean, I'm sure there's nothing fundamental more. It's very difficult to review for changes when you can't see what the changes are. Could I suggest that maybe we have a marked version for future? I'm sure they're not substantial in this case, but it would be very useful because you really don't know whether there's a change on paragraph 9.8 on page 76, you know?
I really did try to do that. It's just I put my track changes on, and where you can get simple formatting, I'll move that paragraph from here to here. It was so you couldn't understand it and couldn't follow it at all. So that's why I did it the way I did. But certainly in the future, I'll try my best to do the track changes, and it's easier to follow.
I understand the point about track changes. I've seen that myself. If maybe you would just put a note next to it where it's changed, and without going through the whole. Because if it's too complicated, that's also equally not understandable. Yeah. I would agree with that. So maybe just a note so we can see where it's being changed, because I know these documents are absolutely riveting reading.
Councillor, I completely take your point about highlighting the changes. Is that not what Daniel has done on page 59, section 3.2?
Well, he doesn't contradict it because he says things like where legislation, where was it, 59, I've lost it, yes, where legislation, this is clearly reflected in documents, where there are clauses that are decided locally, or here, yeah, sorry, number one, and so, yeah, but it's, you can't necessarily really see what it's done to the documents. That's a selective list here. The key policy and procedural updates, the word key. So have there been any others, is what the question that comes to mind.
Is it exhaustive rather than just...
Yeah,
the top
I don't know. No, I'm absolutely sure. As I say, I'm not unhappy at all with the regulations and the report. And it is useful to have in the report itself just the key ones listed. I'm not expecting you to say there's a comma has been changed to a semicolon on page 77. But I just think maybe just then we can actually see, because there's a difference between you spelling out what it does and what it actually does.
Hopefully this time next year there won't be any major changes to anything, so it will be if there are any changes, I'll be able to either do it track changes or produce it with those annotations that you suggest.
I had a question on procurement thresholds. Presumably they're cumulative. So, for example, where it's 15,000, if it's given to one contractor, if there's multiple contracts given to one party, then it sort of gets picked up as well. So multiple small amounts.
Exactly that.
Does the wording of, we just check that the wording of the regulations captures that intent? Could we just review the text?
I believe there's something in there about that.
Yeah, there is, Chair. So the regulations refer to the inability for us to break down what would be large contracts into smaller amounts that then means that we can go through a different route on the thresholds, basically.
Yeah, it's basically to make sure you can't work around the threshold.
Exactly. Yeah, and we publish contracts anyway. It comes through the committees and councils in any case.
But is there a point in time when you presumably there's a size where you have to O-check it as well?
There is, yeah. So that threshold, I think that's in the financial regulation somewhere. Yeah, we've not triggered. We've not.
Pavilion might have.
No, so it's something like 1.7 million, I think. It's quite high. So for us, we've not triggered that yet, but who knows? What's around the corner? Yeah, and really, Chair, just while I'm kind of sort of speaking on this, I would just say that one of the reasons for the thresholds just to continually be increased is partly because things are costing a lot more.
Yeah.
So the sort of basic contracts that we would have approved even, when I joined 9 years ago, the thresholds there were probably down at like £5,000 then, which might have been reasonable to, I don't know, build a new board walk or something. Whereas now those things are, far higher. So the thresholds have gone up, but actually in reality, it's not any greater approval to approve bigger things.
Yeah, in a tracking, it might be worth at some point just thinking about how much is going through on without being going through the procurement process. Is there a material change, i.e., if you see over time as a tracking?
Yeah.
Any more questions from the members? Okay, so just I had a couple of questions also on the procurement side. So section 8.7. So just on the exceptions. So this order do not apply to a couple items. So item 2 means purchase or repair of patented or proprietary goods sold at fixed price. Why would that qualify for exception? And could you just give an example? Just trying to think what I mean, a lot of goods are patented. A lot of goods are subject to the components might be patented or they might be proprietary. Don't know why it would not be subject to the order itself.
I'm guessing what you're trying to get at there is specific proprietary things where there's no alternative option.
Yes.
The way you're forced to buy that part for whatever that piece of kit is, and you can't go out and do a procurement because you can only buy, I don't know, the Honeywell controller for the central heating system because that's the only one that will work.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be an example. The point I was just going to make is this section is very much from the model national regulations, if you like. So we can certainly ask that question whether there are specific examples that they had in mind when designing that element of the model. But I think it is to do with those sorts of things. That's
okay, and I'll take your point. If you've taken it from a national standard, there's a reason. It might not be the right wording, but I understand the reason. But again, item 3, normally supplied by specialist contractors. I mean that could cover a wide range of goods and service categories, all of which are highly competitive. So why would you not subject that to competition? And yeah, I mean again, item 4. I mean. Again, there's lots of items which might involve scientific knowledge, but again, there exists a competitive market for that service. So, to me, the intent here is you apply a competitive process to the council spend in the event where a competitive market exists or there's no compelling, urgent reason to just directly negotiate, and that's fine. I'm not sure that the definitions that have been drawn up in 8.7 define that decision process effectively.
Okay.
In my view, so I'll just ask you just to review that.
Yeah.
Just consider it against, how you actually spend your money. So I want to make sure it's relevant to the activities of the council. But I could think of a number of items here that would qualify under those criteria, but an effective competitive market would exist or might exist, which would, I would expect a competitive process to be followed.
What you could do is you could have something which says that you have to report an exception. If you've done something under that, you believe you've done something under those exceptions, you report it.
Yeah.
Which might just be a way of keeping the wording the same, but
Yeah.
giving you second thoughts before doing it.
Yeah, Chair, we'll go away and give this some further thought, and we'll ask NALC as well, who produced the model, whether they've got specific examples in mind at the point of developing it. So I think the point you make are very valid. Paragraph 8.6 does what Councillor Ray says there in terms of me reporting back in writing when we're exercising certain powers and particular exceptions. There's actually very, very few examples of when actually we would apply an exception in any case. There is one around specialist contractor, but it's not coming out of my head, but there was an example where 0.3 we have applied at some point in the last 4 years. As the meeting goes on, it might come back to me. If not, I'll confirm it afterwards. But there is certainly an example where there was only one specialist provider of this.
And if that is the market for that service, then okay, fair enough. That you just directly negotiate the contract. But again, just on the other items in 8.7, I mean, okay, item 5 I don't have an issue with, because I think we trust your operational judgment to say that this needs to be repaired today. So okay, so that's fine. But again, item 6, again, Carl, we all trust your judgment. But again, you may from time to time deem it expedient to make it the open market. I don't know. I'm not sure that. Why would you not apply a competitive process? Ditto for 7. Again, professional services are competitive. Legal, surveying, architectural. Those are competitive markets. For example, environmental surveys. Item 8, I've less of an issue, because I guess if the council has made a decision to instruct you, then I think the governance on that is pretty clear. So it's just to sense check it against your operational activity. I think we just want to make sure that there's the appropriate competitive process applied to the appropriate spend. Okay, check. Now I had an item on 8.13. I might have mentioned this the last time this came up. So I think this is broadly fine. And I mean, you could define a commercial policy that covered literally dozens of items like payment terms. And I mean, I know you sort of you comply with the law in that. One thing that I think is really important is having clear acceptance criteria. So I know you said the work or things to be furnished or had done, but I think, whether it's a product and particularly a service, you need to know when done is done. So when a contractor is performing a service, and actually services are more difficult to specify than a product often. So I would just again, operation, just consider whether you just want to item, particularly for services, the acceptance criteria is clear, right? You have done the job, it is done, we've accepted it, and presumably then the supplier can submit their invoice and be paid. Okay, sure. I don't think I have any more points on the stuff.
And maybe this is actually coming back to point 8.7. I'm slightly surprised that here there isn't anything around warranties or that type of thing. So I think going back to 8.7, and if it's not in 8.7, you might want to think about it somewhere else. If you're having a piece of work done on something, which is a building, for example, then one of the criteria should be you may well want to do it with a particular contractor, so you cause problems with warranty on the previous piece of work, and that type of thing. So if it's not under one of the 8.7 ones, I'm not sure where else it allows you to specify that when tendering it.
So that's a good point. Maybe 8.13 again.
I just think you want to make sure you cover that off, because I can see that as being something quite often. If you've got a piece of work that's been done, you may well want to go back to a particular contractor to have that further work done. So you don't end up with the argument about whose work isn't working or.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Thank you, Councillor. I'd maybe just consider adding that in 8.13. And yeah, I forgot this. 8.13.5. I'm not sure this reads, every written contract should specify the penalty, when not every contract requires a penalty, but presumably some contracts might. So just, should specify the penalty where appropriate or where relevant. But again, to me, it goes back to acceptance criteria. You should not be invoiced and you should not pay for work that has not been accepted by your officers. Okay. Should we just vote on accepting the regulations now? Then we'll just move on to the standing orders. So all of those in favour of accepting the changes to the financial regulations, please raise your hand. Thank you. Right. So just moving on to the standing orders. Just a personal comment. I do like the fact that the first one relates to not holding meetings in a pub. It's smart. Are there any comments or questions on the standing orders? And again, for those of us who are new to the council, the items in bold, as I understand it, are based on legislation, so they are mandatory. There's no option for us to remove or even amend those. That is the law. That's correct, Chair. Any comments or questions from the team?
Question I was going to ask is, there was talk around them opening up the idea that people could remotely join meeting. Has that moved forward at all? Or?
Yeah, very timely, Chair, actually. So the government last week announced that they had considered the consultation responses and that they were minded to amend the legislation at some point in the future to allow remote meetings, to formally allow councillors to attend remotely. So they've kind of accepted the consultation and they've said that they're going to change the legislation in this Parliament, and that's kind of as far as it's got to. Yeah.
So be nice to go to the 20th. Okay. Any further comments or questions on the standing orders? No. Okay. All of those in favour of accepting the updated standing orders, please raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, right, so we're about a little bit over halfway, so thanks everyone for your patience. We'll crack on. So the next item is an update from one of our partners, the Citizens Advice Organisation.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the information provided by the CAB for 2024-25, showing 414 clients helped with 1,553 issues across the year. So, and they're covering letter and figures in the same format as normal, but have to take any questions. Councillors, any comments or questions?
Just that I think it's money well invested when you think how much they've saved local people, £153,000.
3.5, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more than a 10-to-1
return. Very good investment, yeah.
Just an observation, I noticed the volumes last year appear to have gone down slightly on 23-24, which I don't know whether that represents just things getting a little bit better in society more broadly, but I did notice that cases and clients were down.
Yeah.
Okay, so all of those in favour of noting this report, please raise your hand. Thank you. Right, next item is an update from our partners at the Harpenden Collective.
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the monitoring information provided by the Harpenden Collective. They've provided some great narrative on the work they've done over the last year that was distributed by email, but it's a big document, very colourful, so trying to show value for money and not add it to the pack. But I've included a summary of the information on the table in paragraph 3.3 on page 113. But have to take any questions.
Anything from the members?
I thought it was as good again. Worthwhile, very worthwhile.
But just please.
I'm just going to add to Dan's introduction, and forgive me if it's picked up in the attachment that was emailed around, but as of Monday this week, they moved into their new facility up at Red Gables. So they've now moved out of Harpen Hall into Red Gables, which has been some transformation. I haven't seen the after yet. I'm going up there on Friday. But really, and that is thanks to their vision and the work of the town council. The SLA that we've put in place has enabled them to take on a much bigger facility that enables them to expand their offer to local small businesses.
Where is Red Gables?
Red Gables is the building on the edge of Rockhampton Research.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you're walking up here from here, it's just on the right hand side.
Yeah.
Before you get to the main entrance. So they are on day 3. So it's going really, really well. But that's kind of testament to the work that we've been doing, which is really good. And then just to add on to that, because it's linked, so Harpen Collective are very much at the heart of our business support initiative out in the community. And so there's 2 key things that are coming up that hopefully you would have picked up on in the information bulletin. So we have a business mentoring event, which is the first or second week in July, where we're partnering with the Institute of Directors, specifically the Hertfordshire branch, to host an event in Harpenden that is all around mentoring, sort of support across the sector. That is in many ways a launch for our business forum, for which the first meeting is going to be in September. And business forum, as a reminder, Chair, it is all about trying to bring together businesses to understand, what's going on, and importantly for the town council to try to identify perhaps key challenges that we can help unlock. So as the business forum progresses later this year and into the early next year, I think we'll start to get some probably 3 or 4 priorities that we've made we focus on. Both of those events are open to councillors, and if you haven't already signed up, you're very welcome to come along.
In the past, we did think about whether there was a role of getting somebody as a sort of almost a coordinator, a part-time role in Harpenden to help people with things like what they should be doing around challenging rates and other things. I can't remember where I'm not sure we progressed as such.
Yeah, so Chair, there's kind of 2 parts to how we progressed that. So firstly, we've kind of built part of that role into the SLA with Harpenden Collective, so they're going to help us to design and deliver that, but we are at the design stage. The second bit is this business mentoring event is to kind of kick off some of that, and we hope that off the back of that event there's a real appetite to do more. So I think that could be one of our priorities, and that is very much around how we engage those people locally that might have certain skills and experiences, all different sizes of businesses that might be able to kind of help others. So I think the that aspiration is still there, and that the SLA with Harpenden Collective and the business mentoring event are kind of kicking off that, and we'll see what comes after it. In many ways, the relationship with Harpenden Collective is kind of giving us more value for money rather than employing someone. So, but who's to say that if this doesn't all grow sort of substantially, it might be something the council wants to consider resourcing more in the future. But at the moment, things have got great momentum.
Great.
Yeah, thanks to the town council kind of enabling role, I think is a good example of us being enabling.
We've got a very strong convening power.
Absolutely.
In the community, where we should continue to use that.
The links to sign up, are they in the report that got sent out?
Not sure, Chair, but we'll make sure that they go around.
You go around, that'd be great. Yeah. I just don't recall seeing them, but I'd be keen to.
Yeah, I've signed up.
Send me the link.
I'll have to find out.
Yeah.
If you could share it with the council.
We'll put it in the bulletin this week.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. So, any further comments or questions?
No.
Moving on. So all of those able to note the reports, please raise your hand. Thank you. Very good. Okay, so next section is community grant fund applications, and we have 2 applications. One is from the Grove School Parent Teacher Association, and second is from the Harpen Squadron for the air training course. So Danny would like to introduce both of the applications, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the first is from the Grove Schools PTA requesting £1,413 to support the continuation of the Grove School Lantern Parade during the Southdown Christmas Lights Up event, which requires professional management due to the withdrawal of the police support. And the second application is the Harpen ATC seeking £1,038 to co-fund the purchase of 4 air rifles to expand marksmanship training opportunities for local cadets. The committee is asked to consider these grants, which together total £2,451, leaving £1,549 remaining in this year's grant allocation. Take any questions?
Okay, should we go through the 2 applications one by one? Do you want to just go into a bit more detail on the Grove Schools?
So with the Grove School application, previously the police would deal with all the traffic management. So while the roads were closed and the parade went through, they've withdrawn their support, but certainly for us as an event, that's a key part of the Southdown Lights Up, that the roads are closed and the parade comes through. So that's why the PTA are looking for our support for this year. They're looking to generate their own funding Christmas 26. But again, it's something that might be worth considering as part of the budget setting process, because as I say, it's a key part of the Southdown Lights Up. So if it didn't happen, it certainly.
Can I ask a question? Why isn't this part of the cost for the event? Why is it not an event cost? Why is it a school cost?
It hasn't been in the past because it
Yeah.
hasn't needed to be.
I get that, yeah, but I wonder why it's not just being dropped in as an event cost.
Because it doesn't. I guess it doesn't have to happen. It's a choice that we can make whether we support it or not. So
Yeah.
there's not where for the events it's a reasonably tight budget as is, so we couldn't budget for it from the event costs this financial year.
But we could from next year.
If we build it into the budget when we come to budget setting.
Assuming we want it to continue as is, I'd just be curious as to why it wouldn't just automatically be budgeted for an event cost going forward, rather than it be an expectation on the school. It's just a question really for everyone.
But if there are other events like Scouts, they used to march up the high street, and because of this, they can't do that anymore. So they now just held an event in the park. So are you saying that all events that are done by organisations involve a road closure are funded by the council?
Well, if it's a big event like Christmas lights or Heartland Carnival or anything like that, I'm not saying that every event should be, no, but it's a road closure's the trigger, isn't it? And if it used to be done by the police and now it's not.
But that's what happened with the Scouts.
Did it? And they didn't. Did they get a cost?
Cost and things.
It's not worth it. Yeah.
So
They didn't apply for a grant, I assume.
that the high street, I think, I never actually went on, but I mean, I think it was more of a main street.
Yeah, it's quite a big closure of the whole high street.
So when they had their event, the equivalent event this year, it was just on Barclay Plan.
Is that an option for Southdown in terms of the location? Can they move it? Or is it a bit? Because there isn't really a park there, is there? To got to move it to.
No, but in terms of
setting precedent. Yeah. No, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And it's also going forwards.
So when we do the Christmas lights here, do we close the road here?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
How does that get funded?
So that the town council fund it as part of the event
Okay.
budget. I think that partly to answer your question on this one, this may partly be my personal view on it, and so other event officers might not agree with it. But actually, this element of the Southdown light switch on isn't core to the event. So it's been a nicer add-on that's developed over the years. and has been helpfully enabled by the police. We must say that it's the county initiative to move away from supporting these things, and our brilliant Safer Neighbourhood team don't necessarily agree with that and still do help as much as they can. So it's a county initiative. But I think the simplest answer is any core elements of our events we would properly fund for our own budget.
Yeah.
So I think by its very nature of this coming through this mechanism says that it isn't necessarily
It's not
a core thing.
Okay.
Is there some other way that the school could participate in the South Down light switch on, which doesn't necessitate? I mean, could the events team work with the school to come up with something which doesn't involve road closure?
Yeah, so we would always do that ordinarily. So if you take the example of the Scouts, we came up with the alternative plan that enabled them to still do something. So the team would do that. I think if you look at the cost of the road closure is significant. £1,400 in event terms is quite a lot of brilliant entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why it wouldn't necessarily be a core part of the event budget for us. If Harriet was here, she'd be able to tell me how many jugglers or circus acts you could get for that sort of thing, or face painters and things like that. So we've everything we do, particularly in events wise, we're on pretty lean budget, so we have to be very careful as to where we spend that budget.
Is this the sort of thing whereby I always think with these sort of things it's quite good if you are going to put money into it, rather than doing the whole amount, you offer to basically do a percentage, and then it becomes the task of the other party to go out and raise the money. Part of that means that people do really value it. If people are going out and having to think around doing a car wash or whatever it might be, then they put the effort into doing it, and it's not just an easy option when they thought about it. And it also does it removes a little bit of the risk of everybody coming and saying, well, will you do it? Because you're only going to do a part of it. So they've got to go and find a way of finding somebody else to do part of it as well. So it's sort of, I don't know, it's a bit more of a compromise position.
I think as part of their application, the PTA have said that the funds that they've got are fully allocated at the minute, but that's something that I think they're struggling for this Christmas, but future Christmas,
but giving them there's an optionality there. If it's 1,400 quid, there's 700 pounds to raise. To say, well, like we could say, well, we can do 700, but we've got to spread it around. So you're going to have to go and find the other 700.
I mean, there are several other organisations involved, including the Harpenden Trust, the Brownies, the Scouts, and St John's Church. I'm just wondering whether, to Councillor Ray's point, whether it would be possible to co-fund, so we could put in, I'm just picking a number here, 25% or something and I think Councillor Liver's point about precedent is well made.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering whether in between 0 or 100% of the funding, there's a reasoned and well thought through compromise option where we're able to fund a quarter or perhaps a third. Maybe there's a different number, and then some of the other parties will be able to co-sponsor. Wondering whether that would be an acceptable response to the school.
Yeah, I think, Chair, certainly the committee's gone down that route in the past. That's an option available to you. I mean, what you could do is you could see it over a 2-year period, in the sense of if you were to fully fund this year, if you're looking at over a 2-year period, it's going to cost 2,800 over 2 years, and you're going to fund 50% of that. That's another way of looking at it, because if you did want to fully fund it this time around, you'd be saying to them, we're not going to do it in year 2. That is where you need to fund full funding. That could be another way. And the only reason I mention that is sometimes even having to find £700 stops it from happening.
So I'm thinking that you've got sort of one end, you fund it definitely happens. The other end don't fund it. Sounds like that's a challenge. there's a middle option somewhere. I think you could get to 50%, which says it's a challenge, but you have actually got 6-7 months to do that within. And it gives, if people, want, then I would have thought there's a chance you could get there within that, or from Health from Harlem Trust or whatever within it. But it feels, well, otherwise you're at the zero, which is quite tough.
And just to clarify, did the change in policy from the police come after our budget setting? So when we set the budget for the event, was that on the basis that the police would support? And so the change has come from the change in police policy, and we're now and the school is now responding to that. Okay.
Just to add to that though, just because there's a timing, I'm conscious we're being recorded, so I'm not going to try not to get our local police colleagues in trouble. So this isn't a brand new police initiative. This has been some time. There's been that instruction not to get involved in these things. But I say our super local Safer Neighbourhoods team have continued for some time to do whatever they can. So this isn't necessarily a brand new decision. It's been in place for a little while, but perhaps our local Safer Neighbourhood team have got away with being involved for as long as they possibly can.
Yeah.
It's probably the way. So it's not a brand new pressure.
That's the point well made, and that point's accepted.
In terms of the invoice or the quote from Newport, there's the 6 traffic marshals from 5 till 6:30 in the evening. So 6.5 hours, so maybe 30 hours. Yes,
I spotted that.
So 30 times 23.50 is £705, but it's 9
6
hours.
times 1.5, isn't it? Yeah.
9 hours, not 30 hours. Unless included in that is time spent by them coming up with the quote. But that's an awful long time spent.
The other question I had was, how many other events like this are there? So if we look at how many times do the police community support help out in this way, who are also similar, how many other people are there out there, and how much for precedence it's set from existing?
So I think
So the Scouts is one example.
Yeah, so I think, Chair, there's probably a limited number of existing examples that would set a precedent.
And you can probably ring fence it around existing. You could possibly ring fence it over a short period of time. You could say for 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the precedent point is actually what other groups might see this and go, actually, we would really love to, for our event, that we've never done this before, we would really love to have an element of a road closure. So that could be where
which I think is why there definitely has to be an element of the group who's doing it coming up with some of the money, because that's the incentive, not just to chuck it in there.
Sorry, Councillor Oliver, thank you very much for picking up the quotation on page 122. Yeah, the maths. So I'm confused about the maths. So 6 traffic marshals, each working for 90 minutes, is 9 hours.
Which is
Charge
£12.
charge is that hourly charge?
Yeah.
So 9 times £23.50 is not 700.
211, 212.
So that's
I'd be tempted to check the invoice.
well, yeah, to definitely check the quotation and
Also the charge for
It's only 5
vehicles as well.
hours for a vehicle.
One parade rear marker vehicle. I don't know really what that is, but
yeah,
£366 for.
and then travel. Is that travel for the vehicle?
That's the people.
With the 6 people. Which is fair enough.
Yeah, if we could just check the maths behind the quotation. See that £705 doesn't seem to add up.
I thought about that.
Okay, just conscious of time because it's already 9:15. Councillor Chong, did you have a question? You raised.
No. I think definitely worth to check the invoice, but provided that maybe the figures are amended or updated. In principle, are we like supporting the branding or not?
If we just break this down, so I think there's an agreed action just to check the quotation.
Just for everyone's information, it comes to just over 820 in the recalculation to Pip's observation.
Okay, so if Pip's
Yeah.
is correct, which unless there's probably is a mistake. So but
Yeah.
it's anywhere between 800 and 1400.
Yeah.
So we'll check that. If we can just take a separate decision on to support, I suggest we take a principal decision in terms of a percentage rather than absolute number, because I think we want to establish a principle about future funding, which may help us with further applications. What are the thoughts from the council members about the percentage of the application itself that we'd want to support? Is it 0, 50, 100, or is it a different number?
I take the point of like proportionally and encourage others to chip in, but I think they come to the council under this grant is because that is a kind of a specific one-off incident. It should be. I look at it as in the future we can just after this grant we can just tell them that, oh, I won't grant you next time. So this police not doing the warranty thing will continue. So we have to think about a method in the future. But it's specifically in this like interim period of time that the councils step up and then fund that thing until they can find another location, more time to like work with council, trust, Hubbardston Trust to gather the money or even fundraise by their own PTA. I treat it as like kind of like urgent issues in terms of the timing because they have to do it. And then if they don't have the money, they might not necessarily, even they go to Hubbardston Trust, they have a lot of money, but they also have the protocol. It might not be like within the next couple of months, they can like get the granting. So I'm thinking if it's a one-off event, I'm more tends to.
You'd be minded to support 100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think just because of the interest of the time to clear the hurdles, because this is a social gathering event, and as you said, the Scouts and Hubbardston Trust and all the parents and all the children will come to the street. I think it's a good.
I just want to make time for everyone. So,
Yeah.
Councillor Liver, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I'm sure everybody is very happy to make a financial contribution, but towards the parade. But essentially, what it is it's Grove School doing a parade down the road to the light switch on, and it is quite something to ask other people to contribute. I mean, I know it's a whole event, but you're asking people to contribute to the school parade, and which is quite a lot of money for them. My own personal view is I would possibly agree to paying it this year just so that it happens with a view to some resolution for next year.
Good.
Thank you. And what you're between 0 and 100%, what's your thinking?
Pay it for this year and
You
then.
pay 100% of the.
But on the basis that it's a one-off payment,
Okay, understood.
and then sort it out for next year.
Thank you.
20.
Councillor Jeff,
50%.
50%.
On the basis that there's plenty of time to raise the money
Yeah.
from other sources. And as Councillor Ray said, I think things are valued more when there's a contribution and people will be sourced.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ray?
I would be 50%. I would probably accept that means we should think about if there are other parties out there who are in a similar position with the expectation that might also come to us.
Yeah.
Because I think you can't just look at one and it's in particular. You've got to accept that if there are other people who've been affected by this similarly, you may have to make a similar donation. And that'd be part of my reason for money to potentially be spread to other areas.
50%. Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Drake?
I agree with Councillor Liver. I think that we need to make sure it goes ahead this year, but I'm not very keen on suddenly making a policy decision which may leave the council open to more open-ended costs before the budget until we've actually properly thought it through about what the risks might be of that going forward. I'm not averse to a debate on that at all. I think it's a worthwhile debate, but I would be tempted to avoid setting a precedent at this stage.
So it's 100%, but this is a one-time.
Yes.
Okay. So if I may separate the percentage that we agreed to pay, and I suspect we'll all, and the precedent issue, and we could probably decide on those independently as a committee, if I can suggest that. Councillor Wendt, your thoughts?
So I am with Pip. However, I think £1,500 is too much for the hour that it's going to be closed, and I don't understand how they've got to that. So I would say yes, but I think we need to just check the number first, because 800, yes, for 1 year only.
Yep.
But not, I think 1,500's crazy.
Councillor
They must be able to get some more competitive quotes.
I just wonder on the quote, that 1,700 to 1,800 is the time of the event. Do they have to do work before the event and after the event in relation to the road closure, which therefore adds up to the 5 hours per marshal? I don't know, but that might, it's not clearly set out. I absolutely agree that the maths as it stands doesn't appear to stand up. I do wonder whether, obviously that is the exact time of the event, but presumably there's some work to be done prior and probably the road closure clearing up afterwards. And I wondered if that was part of that, though that would still mean that the hours they're spending setting up and clearing up is longer than the event itself, which
Doesn't add up either.
doesn't really feel right to me. But that I do, so that we don't, I think it's up to the challenging was, but it may prove actually that is the number. Because
I think that's very plausible.
I'd be interested to know if they've added the quotes then as well.
Okay, so if I may break down three things. So this decision to instruct the council officers to obtain a clarified quotation. There's the point about the decision we made today does not set a precedent for future events.
Yeah.
And thirdly, there's the amount of the percentage of the eventual quotation that we agreed to fund.
So can I ask a supplemental question? So I get that it doesn't set a precedent for future events, but does it set a precedent for other events this year that are similarly affected? Because there presumably are. So, or is there an exceptional reason why we're open to doing it for the Grove School and not for
Well, how many other events are there? There'll be Remembrance Day.
We don't know.
We don't know, we don't know.
But the ones that have previously been.
Unknown.
Well, how often does the road get closed in Hartland? Children. As a council, I think we must know that.
Thank you.
So this, off the top of my head, Chair, this is the last one that there would be from third parties. So Remembrance is a town council event, and clearly parade is crucial to that.
Yeah.
Christmas Carnival is the one after that. Top of my head, I can't think of any others. So Sunlight Scouts is the one that's come already.
Yeah.
Right, so just to bring the decisions to a head. So firstly, I'll ask members to vote in favour of requesting an updated quote from the provider. All those in favour? Passed. Secondly, councillors to vote on to confirm that this would not, our decision tonight would not provide a precedent for future decisions. Raise your hands. Correct. Those in favour of paying 100% of the eventual quote, please raise your hands. That is.
More fans.
You abstaining?
After amendment.
I think if it's 100% and it's not, and we've got no precedent for next year, then I'm fine with it.
So we've agreed that it will be no precedent.
Yeah. I'm just spelling my thought process out now. Sorry.
So we have three definites in favour of 100%.
What about you?
I'm trying to let the committee come to. I do have a view, but I'd like to let other people have their say first. Councillor Wendt? Dr. Phone a friend?
No, I've just said yes. I've agreed.
Okay, so we have 4 votes in favour of paying 100%. So that's a majority. For the record, I would have voted 50%, but that's 4.
Okay. I'm hoping it's going to be about 50 when they redo the maths.
See. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to the next item, which is application from the Harpenden Squadron of the Anything. Summarise the application, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there's 4 items that they're wanting to purchase to improve their air rifle marksmanship. And the ATC are going to provide 50% of the funding for the rifles. And we'll be providing that 50% is what the application is for.
Any comments or questions from the members, please?
For the record, I like the fact that they're providing 50%. I think that shows.
Well,
Appreciate.
But I think as a general point, I certainly I feel much better about using money when it's being other people putting their money into membership.
how do we feel about guns?
The army and the air force.
I'd say national defence has never been a bigger priority than it is today.
I mean, it's like having aircraft carriers without any planes, isn't it?
I think they have pellets, presumably. Don't.
I would approve.
Okay. So I think the vote is, so the ask is for us to pay half of the cost of £2,076, which is £1,038, and they would subsidy the other 50% from their own subscriptions and reserves. So all of those in favour of approving the application from the squadron for the air rifles?
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Where does this leave us from a budget perspective? In terms of what's left to, and what's the timing on that?
So for the
Top of the
remainder of
page.
the year, there'll be £1,549 left, depending on what happens with the Grove School application. Oh no, it won't. So ignore that. So 1,549 plus we've got an additional 4,000 in earmark reserves that's
Okay,
been released, plus an additional 4,000 that hasn't been released.
and that
then-
takes us up to
So
date wise.
1,549 is for this year only. If there's any others between now and so we've got 8,000, if you like, on top of that
The end of March.
to the end of March.
Fine,
But
yeah.
if that 8,000 isn't spent by the end of March, that rolls forward each year.
Okay, sorry to derail that mood.
Okay, right, next item is, I believe, our complaint policy.
Thank you, Chair. So the next 3 items are very similar and all relate to various policies for your approval. The first report presents the updated complaints policy. It outlines the council's approach to handling complaints, comments and compliments, ensuring alignment with current legislation and the council's business plan. The policy has been reviewed as part of the council's routine policy maintenance to maintain high standards of service and accountability. Happy to take your questions.
So are there any material changes to the policy that you'd like to highlight?
No, Chair, it's all just for this comment, really. I don't think if there's any change to that.
I had a question, which I probably should know the answer to this, but do we record and report on what complaints we have had?
We do, Chair, yeah.
Do we have any data or reports on how many
Yeah.
and the topics?
Yeah, I'm just thinking the last time we brought that through to committee, we'll check that. And it's probably useful to put on the full plan actually for later this year to give a bit of a summary.
Yeah, just sort of
Yeah.
days of where are we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's not much.
Do you receive many complaints, or what are they typically about? Just anecdotally.
Yeah, so we received quite a few. Well, it's difficult to say whether it's quite a few. We receive complaints. A large part of that relates to kind of green spaces, probably in the public realm. We're not inundated with it. We
Yeah.
probably have, perhaps some might say, some serial complainants.
Yeah.
That perhaps at time verge on vexatious complainants, and we've got policy for that. So largely around green spaces and the assets that we own, essentially. Yeah, but I think it'd be useful to bring a summary table through this committee. I think from memory, we've published it in the information bulletin in the past. I can't remember when we've done it, but useful to give if you're okay for us to do it, we'll bring a summary of the last, say, 12 months to the next one of these meetings, to give you an idea, a flavour of what they are.
It's one of those things you can sort of feel you ought to monitor as to whether it's going up or going down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we kind of monitor that. I think it's useful just to bring it through here in the same way that we do the health and safety reporting, incident reporting.
And maybe it's at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you think to compliment them as well, just as a matter of time?
Yeah, absolutely. There's there's 4 times as many of those. We can easily do that.
I suppose the joking aside is the compliment, the complaints are the complaints being directed at the right organisation? And therefore the question is, people aren't understanding of what the role of the town council is, and how can that be rectified?
Yeah, it's a good point, Chair. So you'll see from the stats, we collect all complaints that come in, even if we ultimately then say, actually, that's not to do with us.
Yeah.
So the numbers in the table we'll be able to share with you those as well. And then given the role that we tend to take is we very rarely just say that's not our responsibility. Quite often it might be highways related. So we would do one or two things. We would advise the resident to go on the highways portal and report an issue, but more often than not, we would also do it as well. So the stats will show everything that's come in, even those that we've then assessed as not being for us.
Okay. All of those in favour of approving the complaint policy, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is our FO freedom of information policy.
Chair.
So to interrupt you, so able to follow any material changes.
So again, with all of the policies, Chair, there aren't any material changes to anything. It's purely a good housekeeping, good governance exercise to give councillors the opportunity to review them.
Okay, thank you.
This report seeks approval for the revised FOI policy and publication scheme. The document provides guidance on managing information requests to the council, ensuring transparency and compliance with legal obligations. The review ensures the policy remains current and consistent with legislative changes and best practices, but there aren't any material changes or any changes to the documents from what was previously approved.
Questions from the council members, please?
Also, just as a stat, at the same time as doing the other one on complaints, how many FOIs we have and what we think that servicing them is taking is sort of useful stuff.
Yeah. So it's all on the same spreadsheet actually. So we can and just for your quick interest, the number of FOIs ordinarily are related to probably lens of journalism. So the FOI Act has generally been abused in my view. It's there for local communities to find information out. Actually, the number of journalist inquiries we get about figures for this, that, or the other, it's quite unusual actually. But again, we track that.
Okay. All those in favour of approving the FY policy, please raise your hands. Is everyone?